Hey everyone, in this video I will review this keyboard and I will compare it to this keyboard, because this is the AKAI MPK Mini, which I already had, and this is the Synido, I don't know, Tempokey K25 MIDI keyboard. As you can probably tell already, this was sent to me by the developer. So this is basically paid promotion. So if you think that this is not going to be honest enough, then sorry. But yeah, I still think that I'm going to be honest. Speaking of honesty, the big problem with this product is that on the surface level, both of these keyboards have the same features. Let me show you on the example of this one before unboxing this. This keyboard has 2 octaves, 8 knobs, 8 pads, a bunch of controls that all keyboards have, like octave up, octave down, and a joystick for pitch bends and Modwheel, and some other functions that I never touch actually. And yeah, this keyboard has the same features basically, at least on the surface level. So the big question is, why would you buy the Tempokey? I cannot find Synido Tempokey on Thomann, where I would usually buy music instruments, but here on Amazon it costs 118 euro, while the AKAI MPK Mini costs 83. So this is basically a difference of around 30 euro. So let's see if it's worth it. Alright, let's open this. Okay, interesting. So this keyboard actually comes with its own little pocket, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure if I would walk around on the streets just holding this pocket in my hands. Like I'm running around with my keyboard. But I mean, it is probably useful for transporting it along with other things, and it looks pretty cool while doing so. Here you have a view of both keyboards side by side, and you can see that the AKAI one is slightly less long, which makes sense for desks like these that are never really tidied up correctly. They have pretty much the same height though. I would say they weight around the same. Before testing the keyboard, I want to quickly mention all the other things that were in the package. For example, here there is a little MIDI adapter in case you want to use the MIDI output of the keyboard. Then there is this really strong looking USB cable. A USB adapter in case that your computer does not have a normal USB connection, I suppose. A user manual that I'm not going to read, because honestly when I'm using MIDI keyboards like these, I always use them rather surface level. Like I don't dive through these menus to see which fancy features they can provide, and I also rarely map anything to the knobs unless I really want to play something now. For me, it's just important that the main features are accessible, like wanting to perform melodies or drums. What is this? It looks like a power cable, but it ends on USB. Does this thing actually need power, or is it just plugged into the computer like the AKAI? We're going to find out. But even more interestingly, it has these belts, so you can probably wear it and play it while standing up, just like a guitar. Honestly, I don't see where you can attach them, but that might be a reason to read the manual actually. Not now though. Or do they just want me to use this to like put my keys on it or something? The AKAI one does not come with a MIDI output, but they both have a sustain input, which I also never use, even though I have pedals. But they are for sim racing. Can I actually use them as sustain pedals? That would be cool. I gotta say, it's kinda annoying that I have to use a whole different type of cable to get it connected, because that means that I won't be able to switch quickly between the one and the other keyboard. So if it will turn out that the Tempokey is good at some things and the AKAI is good at other things, then I have to make a decision, because I will definitely be too lazy to always change that. It would be cooler if these kind of things were standardized, so that I don't have to make a decision. Unfortunately, my second USB connection on the front of my computer broke. That's why I always have to plug the keyboard in at the back side, and also the cable that I have for the other keyboard is also not very long. But it would be cool if keyboard designers would think about these kind of things and provide you with a slightly longer cable, just in case that you have a situation that is a little bit like this. Because you know, this is still pretty normal, I would say. I think there are definitely even worse cable situations in some homes. For some reason, it didn't automatically activate the keyboard when I plugged it in, but I had to go into the menus of Bitwig to enable it. It was listed though, so the DAW did definitely recognize the keyboard. That's why I don't know if it's a keyboard issue or a DAW issue. Yep, that was fun. And it's much better than the melody that I have on this track otherwise, which is this. Let's not talk about it. Actually, I will load a new synthesizer, Synth 1. Nice. The AKAI keyboard has buttons for octaving up or down the range, which is very important when you don't have a lot of range on a keyboard. And of course, this keyboard also has these functions. But it also has buttons for transposing in semitones. It doesn't go over 6 semitones though. And it also goes to -6 semitones. I get the idea behind that because 6 plus 6 is 12, so you do get a full range of octave. But just for workflow reasons, I would personally allow for a range of -12 to 12, so that people can feel a little bit more free while adjusting the transposition on their keyboard and don't have to immediately know in which direction they gotta go. I have to say, the reflections on the keyboard look pretty cool. I kinda like the vibe of that. But yeah, the transposition parameters are very useful for if you just want to use the white keys, but you're just in a different scale, obviously. Next up, I want to talk about the transport parameters. I want to test them. I never had a MIDI controller that has transport parameters. They don't work. Why not? Hey guys, this is me from the future, exactly 1 day later to be precise. I had some issues yesterday that I couldn't resolve and now I resolved them. I was now able to map these things. It was pretty straightforward. I want to tell you one other thing about these buttons. Sometimes they are not very reactive, okay? So we are currently on this loop and now when I press play, doesn't work, now it works. Stop worked, play, play. I might have to remap it again. I put stop on this one and play on this one, but when I hit play again, it has to deactivate itself before I can actually play again. And I find that pretty unintuitive. What if play and stop is just the same thing? That would make sense, right? Play, stop. Oh, it needs to be a different thing. Okay. But that is a shame because I don't understand what this is meant for. I don't always want to have to press on this again before I can play again. Oh, no, I get it. It then just puts the playhead somewhere else. I mean, that's useful, I guess. But still, if I press stop to go back to the start position, then I want the play button to realize that it doesn't play anymore. That would be pretty cool. I'm not the best drummer on these types of EQ pads, but it's good enough to get the basic idea down. Now, there is one thing that always annoys me a little bit when performing drums or other synthetic instruments like that, which is that sometimes it can feel a little bit weak if you accidentally hit the notes with a too low velocity. Like that second rim there. That was not on purpose. And usually what I have to do then is I have to grab the keyboard again and make a velocity curve module and make this, and then it will remap all of the velocity to max out. That's okay, that's an okay workflow. I would say in most DAWs that's more complicated. But it would be actually much better if the keyboard had a button for that. And I'm saying that because that is the case. You can hit the fixed velocity button and when that is activated then they will all have the maxed out velocity, which is nice. while we are at it, if you are trying to solve common beatmaker problems where you just want to make people's lives easier, I would recommend implementing a feature that actually extends notes to being longer than they are being played, if that's possible, because that would result in drums being more playable. If I only hit this button really quickly, it will only play some part of the rim shot. And I actually have to go there and turn up the release time so that it still plays in a good way. Now I would have to do that with all of the instruments here, and I might not even want that, because for example here on this hi-hat I already added decay so that it is shorter. Would be cool if with this decay I could control the whole sound of it so that I don't even have to touch the release knob at all. That would be the case if each pitch's notes were latched to each other automatically, and I think that could also be a useful feature for a beatmaker keyboard like this. If it's not already here and I'm just not seeing it, but that is definitely something that I would like to see, and it is inspired by this button. So here I prepared a little macro knob on these drums because I want to attach it to the Modwheel modulator of this keyboard, because I want to compare it to the workflow with the joystick of this keyboard. Okay, now I got a MIDI modulator, and when that MIDI modulator is being set to CC1, then that is Modwheel. So I can attach it to my macro and then play something. I can move to different values pretty fast. For example, for this kick, I like to play it up here. And for the rim, I like to play it a little bit lower, where there was still more tightness on the sound. So that seems to have a good workflow. Now I actually have to attach the other keyboard again, even though it's kind of annoying with the cable. Okay, so first of all I have the problem that this cable is actually a little bit shorter, and of course that there is no velocity thing anymore, so I have to make my hack again. Okay, awesome. Okay, so what I like about the joystick is that it's way easier to get back to the 0 point, because it happens when you just lift it. While on the Modwheel fader of the Synido Tempokey, you actually have to move down with your finger to get back to a lower point. However, it also feels like it simply has more precision to use a fader than a joystick, because a joystick just doesn't give you much room for movement, so you can't feel into going to a precise value. It's more of a rough transition when I try to play it. That's why I usually don't do it. Also, this joystick is actually bi-directional. You can also turn it down, and when I do that, it seems to also go up in my configuration, even though here in Bitwig I never said that it should be rectified. I don't know why it does that. There is also no feature to turn it off as far as I can see, but that's not the problem of the keyboard, more of a Bitwig thing. But it also just means that I cannot really use this joystick as it was meant to be, to have different directions for up and down, so that is unfortunate. Now the left and right movements are for the pitch bends, so let's choose a different instrument. By default, Synth 1 has a pitch bend range of 12 notes, which is already the case in any plugin. I put it to 2, where things normally are. Okay, so it definitely feels kinda intuitive to use the joystick. Especially the fact that it bounces back quickly here comes in as a favorable thing, because pitch bends usually wanna end in a rather hard way. Now let's compare that to the pitch bend feeling on the other keyboard. Here we are back at the Synido keyboard. Wait, what? Sometimes it did not register that I actually hit this key. I had a bug yesterday where pressing this key specifically, the D sharp key, the low D sharp, didn't always trigger a MIDI note. And that is of course a big no-no. But I updated the firmware and that was pretty easy. I just had to press and hold this button, which is also the main volume control, which is pretty cool that there is a main volume control, by the way. I didn't mention that yesterday. And if you hold it, then it will automatically update the firmware. And apparently they already knew this bug because now it doesn't happen anymore. Or maybe it just randomly doesn't happen anymore. I don't know. It seems like it is fixed, which is cool because that means that there is actually a solution. When there are bugs, then there can be firmware updates and the process is pretty easy. I'm surprised about that because usually I think hardware stuff is pretty complicated, but this was pretty straightforward. Cool. Now about the pitch fader, I do feel like the joystick has a bit of a better workflow when it comes to pitch bends, because it takes quite some time to go up on the fader to find the perfect position. Especially if you want to be on the maxed out position, it can easily happen that you slide a little bit too far and then it will not register any pitch bend anymore. But sometimes you just want to be on the max out position because it is on exactly 2 semitones, and if you know that the next tone in the scale is that much away, then you just need to go to that exact value. I think that's the reason why I feel like the joystick is the better option for this kind of modulation, because you often want to go to the extreme value and otherwise you want to go to the half value if it's like a half step up. Actually, it makes me wonder if it would be a cool workflow if pitchbend sliders were actually not sliders but buttons, and there would be internal smoothing to handle the fact that it should be sliding. That would be a workflow that I would like to experience on a keyboard, even though I've never seen it anywhere. But it would make sense because you often just want to go to specific half steps or full steps, so why not? Or would it seem too robotic? What's your opinion, everyone? I want to talk about the reason why this keyboard is called the Tempokey, because it has an arpeggiator function on the buttons here on the right side. Let's check out what the arp is like. Okay, so the arp is playing. It's playing rather slowly. Can I change the tempo? There is a tap tempo button. Let's try it. I feel like it didn't work the first time because I was hitting it very fast and it didn't change the tempo to being fast. But then it suddenly worked. Okay, so what it does work. Now, note repeat. The note repeat button doesn't do anything special when the ARP is activated. Let's deactivate the ARP. Wait, what? What is note repeat supposed to do when it's activated? I thought it was going to be something like note repeat in Bitwig, which sounds like this. Or I'm misunderstanding that. I will have to also compare it with the AKAI note repeat feature. But for now, I will just use the ARP. I'm personally not very convinced that this ARP is fun. Usually, you need an arpeggiator to be in sync with the music. Like the arpeggiator in Bitwig that will automatically be mapped to 164 BPM and even consider the swing settings that I have in this project, which is why it sounds so wonky. Yeah, that's usually the case with arpeggiators. Now, I do wanna say that it can be pretty cool to have an ARP that is not tempo sync. For example, So for these kind of modulations where you just want to use very fast times and you want to smoothly modulate between them, it is kind of cool when it is just not tempo sync, but just running freely, because then you can really hear how the rhythms speed up and slow down. However, that is not something that you can accomplish with a tap tempo button, because that always takes a long time for the keyboard to register the new tempo. Yesterday, I wanted to know what I can do with the ARP. So when it is selected, I can do something like this. And it kept playing after I lifted my hands. The reason for that was because I chose Latch mode, which is pretty cool. You know, there are these words over the keys, and oh shit, I need a macro objective. That is not cool. Anyway, there is one that says Latch, and yeah, when I hold ARP and press Latch, then Latch is activated. And when I then use the ARP, the stop button doesn't seem to be used to stop things, but pressing on ARP does. There are also different options for the ARP, like you can set it to have more octaves or swing or a different rhythm. Now obviously that has to be taken with a grain of salt, because even though you have these tempo sync-ish steps, you still have to tap the tempo with the tap tempo key, and that is just not synchronized with the DAW. Hey everyone, this is me from the future again, but an even more distant future, in which I will summarize the findings of this test. First of all, what kind of features do both of these keyboards have? Both of them have 2 octaves of keys, 8 drum pads, 8 knobs, Modwheel and Pitchbend, buttons for transposing the keys in octaves, and a latch mode. Yep, this one also has a latch mode. Now, before talking about which properties each keyboard individually did better than the other one, I wanna quickly talk about the remaining problems of keyboards like these in general. Both of them have ARPs, by the way. I didn't show the AKAI one because I couldn't get it to work, but it exists and it probably works somehow. But as you have already seen on the Tempokey example, ARPs that come from a keyboard are pretty useless in a DAW context because the lack of tempo and project sync, and also because of the lack of other experimental features like a rate control as a knob that could still bring a fun component into it. At this point, it is just a feature that is just there to make the product look a little bit bigger, in my opinion. I wouldn't buy a keyboard because it has a cool ARP unless it is like way better than all of the ARPs I've ever seen on a keyboard. Now, what was better on the AKAI keyboard? Honestly, not that much. On the AKAI keyboard, I only really liked the pitch bend more, because bending pitch feels nice with the joystick, as I have talked about before. Now, the Tempokey keyboard, which is a little bit more expensive, comes with even more advantages. It comes with a bag, so you can carry it around to your friends. It comes with a volume knob. It has the, in my opinion, better Modwheel UX. It comes with a slightly longer cable. And also, by the way, I got an email from them today in which they said that they are also working on a keyboard, or maybe they have already released it, with Bluetooth support. We can probably ignore the cable situation entirely, unless you are concerned about the latency of Bluetooth keyboards. Might be that is problematic. I had a Bluetooth keyboard once, but I didn't use it enough to have a strong opinion on it. I can just say it was pretty fun the first time when I used it with my friends, because we were hanging out in a room that had different levels, so you always had to climb up and down a ladder to get to different places. So it was cool to just get somewhere and then play the keyboard there. With a Bluetooth, that was pretty cool. So I don't know, if the Bluetooth is implemented well, then I guess it can be fun. Another thing that this keyboard has is semitone transpose buttons, just in case that you are afraid of hitting the black keys. If you wanna play something pretty complicated and you just wanna make your life a little bit easier and you're not a masochist, then you should probably enjoy the semitone transpose buttons. Then of course there are the transport buttons, which enable you to play the keyboard without having your other keyboard around the entire time. Also very nice. And most importantly, there is the fix velocity button, my favorite feature. because it just enables you to skip this whole process of adding the velocity module in Bitwig. And since I'm doing that all the time, I think this button is a pretty smart invention. It is up to you to decide if that makes the Tempokey more worthy than the AKAI. Goodbye.